Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video view series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. For this video, I'll be reviewing the one-shot adventure Lake of Secrets, designed by Sebastian Yue for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Shoutouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Manuel, Basil, Wizard Princess, Christopher, Dave, Star Loverly, and Gaston. And Gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy Numa, Marcos, Dave, Vicente, Gilberto, Adam, Dead Lizard, Lion, Sam, Ross, Limpy Spuds, Jerome, Fatboy 619, Sclinia, Nick, and Party McButterpants. Thank you all very much for support. Lake of Secrets is a Tier 1 adventure for levels 3 to 5, a one-shot. And I need to emphasize, as always, there's a big difference between level 1, 2, 3, 4, and level 5. Just be aware if you're designing a Tier 1 adventure and you've got that level range in there, that's a big player gap. Lake of Secrets, unlike most one-shots, is very light on combat and very heavy on story and role-playing and exploration. And I think it's to its benefit. It's all that stuff is really good and really well designed and well written. You just need to know and this is a good reason why you're watching this review, you need to know that it is, you can easily get through this entire adventure without fighting at all. And the adventure almost even works better if you're not fighting at all, which it doesn't really set up like that's going to be the case. It just happens to be, there's not a whole lot of combat and there's no filler whatsoever, which I appreciate in terms of pacing a one-shot out. You definitely don't want to have a whole lot of just, random combat encounters, but this one especially has really no combat, even though, as is the case with pretty much all one-shots, it is focused around a single dungeon crawl, which is why it's even more surprising that it doesn't involve a whole lot of combat. The story setup is that this city, which I don't know if this is a real Forgotten Realms city or an original one, has been invaded by a demon army, and the city fell. They lost that war because they are apparently not a bunch of fighters. And while they were, I guess, occupied by the demons suddenly disappeared. Like they were just vanished. And nobody quite knows why. And the secret is that the leader of the city made a pact with some mages from out of town, let's say. And they basically agreed that they could get rid of the demon problem, but he'd have to sign over his life force, basically. And really a lot of stuff that he probably should have read the fine print on. Always read the fine print on your binding ritualistic contracts, folks. And so the leader's gone, and it's up to the players that are hired to kind of go and figure out what happened to him, or them, sorry, they're non-binary. And it doesn't sound like at the outset there would be no combat here, but there's a lot of story there. Like there's a lot of information about the leader, Aist, who made the pact. Their wife is involved in this, and then the three mages who come from apparently the elemental plane of water, because this town was like built on a former portal. I mean, I think it still is a portal. Actually, it's where the final encounter takes place, called the Twisted Novasimites, because the Novasim, I think, was the city they're from. Is all like a big part of the story, and you can see there's all this like backlog, this dramatis personae, which you don't usually get this for a fairly short. This is a 20-page one shot that you can run in a single session. This is a lot of background information. It's almost too much when I was reading it. And then once we got into the dungeon and I realized how much story we were actually going to get through, I was actually really impressed by it, knowing now that was the theme of this dungeon. That wasn't a typical hack and slash dungeon at all. So there's a beginning bit where you can, get into town and talk to some vendors and equip, whatever, kind of hand wave all that. There is an interesting addition where you could have a NPC ally join you. It's meant to be where only if you're low on players, you have fewer than 4 players, should you bring this person along, but I would recommend trying to do it anyway, because they're one of the 3 mages that are disguised as the NPC escort who is bringing the party to the boss, just so that the boss is fully aware and can lead the players into I guess the final, even though she doesn't actually like do anything to undermine the players or have them stumble into a trap or anything like that. So it's not quite capitalized on to the degree that I would like to have seen. Instead, it's meant to be this kind of final twist where you enter the final room, and she just happens to like transform into whatever they are, like fish people or something, tritons or something, and it's just kind of a shocker there. So the actual dungeon is done in. We do get maps, by the way. I'm trying to scroll down here. Okay, here we go. So we get maps. This is not a Dyson logo style. This is better than that. I think it looks better. It's textured, which looks really nice. There's a few little details here and there, which I appreciate. Unfortunately, we don't get any color, so it's not quite up to the standards of a virtual tabletop, but I do like that they are at least better than like a basic graph paper design. Oddly enough, we get maps for these first 2 levels, but there is no map for the final confrontation, which is below the second level, even though that's probably the most likely one that you're gonna have a fight in. So that seems like a really odd oversight there. We do get a separate zip file that includes player versions and DM versions. These are the player versions, obviously, with the annotations. And that zip file also includes player handouts and tokens of all these characters that you're seeing right here. These are the 3 evil mages, and then I believe the wife. There we go, Queen Laquea, and the leader themselves, Iced the Fallen, who's a little dragonborn. And that's what the one elf looks like when his form is revealed. So that's really cool. There's a lot of like cool VTT additions to it, but I just wish the maps were a little better quality. So the actual dungeon crawl is filled with traps. There's a lot of exploration. There's a potion cabinet where you can discover like some rings that the leader and their wife traded with each other. You can get some magic items. This little room up here, I think this is the crypt room. This was the weird part story-wise. So you can meet the wife, who was apparently the only one of the few warrior soldiers in the city that helped repel the demons, but she was ultimately killed. For some reason, these mages reanimated her and stuck her here to where she's like an undead warrior. Pretty powerful stat block too. Although I don't think it's quite I don't know, it's somewhere around like a white stat block maybe. And she can't leave this zone, and she's not hostile, but if I didn't see the point of her story-wise, other than the players can talk to her, and it can be a nice role-playing moment. I just didn't see the motivation for the villains to actually reanimate her. It seemed like it would have been a better solution to put her as a guardian to them, so that they reanimated her as a undead warrior to guard them from any excursions while because the final confrontation is they're trying to drain the leader, Iest, drain their life force, and in doing so they also are kind of twisting the landscape around them and kind of draining and poisoning the soil and everything. So it would make more sense if Laquea was used as a kind of mid-boss fight maybe, and plus oddly enough, and I don't usually have to say this, but this dungeon kind of could use another fight or two. As it is, you don't have to fight her at all, and you can kind of learn a little bit more about the situation, but it's just supposed to be kind of a social encounter. If players do want to fight her, she'll raise a bunch of zombies and fight them, but it doesn't really accomplish anything. There's a moment where one of the other mages attempts to flood the area as a warning, but it just kind of ends up being a tease. Once you make it through the secret door, which I like the fact that the designer does mention that even if they don't find the secret door, that have them accidentally find it, they get close to it and one of them bumps against something, but in that case, just, I don't know, don't make it a secret door. They enter this fountain room. They'll need to solve a puzzle in a previous room where you grab the right kind of sword and put it in the statue, which I like. And then both of these offshoot rooms, and keep in mind, none of this is combat right now. There's no combat. There are some traps in front of some rooms. There's arrow traps and pit traps and things. There's some things you'll have to do and a lot of checks you'll have to make. So you're still making dice rolls. There's just no combat unless you wanted to fight the wife, the undead wife there, who poses no threat and she can't leave her circle. It's no reason to fight her. Then there's no combat, and instead you go into these 2 rooms on the offside, which are the study and the bedroom, and you learn more about the story, which it uses the kind of video game-esque audio log type thing, except here it's an illusion that plays out like a hologram, where you can see Ice making the bargain and crying and slicing their hand and all this, and you kind of get to where I'm glad the designer didn't go down the trope of the the leader made a pact. In fact, I think this is part of the plot line for Descent into Avernus, where the leader made a pact that ultimately like damns the entire kingdom or area. But in this case, they did it to protect everybody and sacrifice themselves. They are actually a martyr about this. It just happens that you can still save them. And then the study, you actually get to find the contract and find everything. So by the time you get to the final room, if you've explored everything, you've learned more about this story. Interestingly enough, you can even learn more that the fact that these mages, these twisted Novosamites, they repelled demons from their plane of existence, which I think was the elemental plane of water. And in doing so, they learned how to get rid of them, but at the cost of their own, the sacrifice left all 3 of them almost devoid of compassion, with Nexir, who is the leader, bearing the brunt of the dark magic effect. So it's something they had to do, ended up like poisoning themselves inside. And because they knew how to get rid of demons, but it hurt them, whenever this city, which is connected to them via this portal, had the same problem, they went to them and said, hey, we can get rid of your demon problems, but we need to basically agree to drain your life and your kingdom to restore ourselves. So what's interesting is they're not just like mustache twirling villains. They've actually got motivation stuff behind them, which is really cool. They feel like fully fleshed out characters. Again, this is all a one shot you're doing in the span of a couple hours. Like, it's really impressive that the adventure is doing this, which means at the end, the adventure includes a part 4 epilogues, which includes apparently 7 different endings depending on what you want to do. Now, some of them are very similar. You can fight them and then you either fight them and kill them, or fight them or flee, and they end up escaping through the elemental plane of water, for example. Those are counted as 2 different endings, but not really. But you could decide, for example, to convince these mages that, like, hey, don't, drain, what you did was great, but don't hold up the other end of the bargain where you have to drain people's life forces. Like, this person was willing to give up their life. You should be, willing to give up your life, and blah, blah, blah. That could be an ending. Or you could go Dragon Age Origins with it and have a character sacrifice themselves, one of the player characters, in place of Iast, and say, hey, drain my life and you can take me instead. Obviously you can just fight them. You can join forces with them. You can convince some of them, but not all of them. So it ends up being a fight and you get some allies. It's really interesting the way the adventure allows for these different eventualities, and I appreciate that a lot of adventures, one-shots especially, tend to skimp on the epilogue. They're usually like a single paragraph or something where the whole story is taking place, and it'll be like just a hand-waving mention about the after effects, whereas this one really does care about its story so much that it includes all these different epilogues and all these different ways in which you can affect the story at the end, which is good because thus far the one-shot is extremely linear, which, again, it is a one-shot. It's probably going to be very, very linear. You've got the dungeon crawl. That's what you're going to do. The only thing you could decide is what to do with the undead wife, and ultimately how much information you want to learn based on the different rooms that you explore. And yes, that's included. Lakwea's fate is included in these different epilogues. Ultimately, I think she is released and turned back into basically a corpse, assuming you get rid of the evil mages. But the only thing I was really confused about is why they raised her and stuck her there to begin with. And in fact, that's actually a point of contention between the 3 of them, which, again, I like the fact that they're all, fully fleshed out characters. But for example, the one who has been spying on you as I forget how she's able to shapeshift into somebody else, but she is not cool with the undead being raised. That was something she didn't know about. That was something that Nexir did. So I think it's really cool the way that all these characters feel like they are actual characters and not just, cliche stereotypes or something. And the fact that every single thing that you meet is a potential social encounter is very impressive. There is no just random like monster fight or anything to that effect. I believe at the very beginning it does mention, like, before you even get to the dungeon, like while you're getting there, you can have it, throw some giant centipedes are there and phase spider. That seems extremely weird and random for this adventure, when the rest of the adventure doesn't do that at all. There's no random encounters. There's no anything. Everything has a meaning and a purpose. There's a lot of story, and I appreciate the story, which is good because there's just really not a whole lot of combat here. And I do like the dungeon design and the maps. I wish had color, and it's really weird that we don't get a map of the final chamber, given how big of a final chamber that is. It should be, it needs to be, I need to be able to visualize what's going on there, and it looks cool too. You like paint this picture of the 3 and they're like tethered, and Iast is like in midair and they're like draining the life force from them. Like it seems like a really cool situation. It's just a bummer we don't actually get the maps associated with that. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for the Lake of Secrets. Pros, it effectively focuses on story, characters, and exploration for the entire time. All of that stuff is very well done, very well written, well designed. I think it's for, D&D is a very combat-heavy RPG system, so to have an adventure that puts combat on the back burner is a very tricky thing to do, and I think this pulls it off very, very well. Pros, it includes maps, tokens, and player handouts in a separate zip file, which is always nice to see. And I do, it's weird. I like this map design. I like the way it looks. I just wish that it had given some color. And pro, multiple epilogues and endings depending on the final confrontation, which is very impressive for a adventure of this size. Cons, that one story bit about why they reanimated the wife still sticks in my craw because the adventure's so good about all the story bits. That one just doesn't make any sense to me. And I feel like the easy fix would be put her as a guardian that the players have to deal with. Either you have to destroy her to unlock the final place, or she's just standing in front of it to where they have to, and it could still be a social encounter, it doesn't have to be a combat encounter, but make it so there's a reason for being there rather than just this kind of room you open up and then you can just close again and be like, okay. And the other con is that the maps are black and white only, and that we have no map for the final encounter, which feels very, very strange given how much of a big deal that is and in a cool area. And there's even like the portal to the elemental plane of water is like there where you can like shatter this like glass and all this, water comes streaming and everything. It seems like a really cool location to do a final encounter. It's a bummer we don't have a map for it. Final verdict, Lake of Secrets is the rare D&D adventure that focuses on storytelling, exploration, rather than hacking and slashing, much to its benefit. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson, and you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.